Game over, man. Game over. Johnny.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
Why so serious?
I am Iron Man.
This is a tasty burger.
Welcome to the InSession Film Podcast.
Welcome to episode 563 for December 3rd, 2023, and I'm JD Duran.
And I'm Brendan Cassidy.
Hey, thanks for joining us this week, everybody. It's going to be a really fun episode.
Cagey.
I hope you all brought your Nick Cage manic energy to this episode.
I know JD did, especially after yesterday's game.
Oh my gosh. Again, I have to apologize. We're going to start things here with a little InSession Sports.
I'm going to time you on this one. I'm going to time you on
I'm actually not going
to time you on this one.
I'll keep it brief. Okay, look. My Michigan Wolverines are back to back Big Ten champions 3 years in a row.
Absolutely.
It's been great. And I will say this one might be the most satisfying of them all because as I talked about briefly on last week's show or a few weeks ago on Patreon, for anyone that listened to that, this year has been a little challenging for my Michigan Wolverines. They've faced some adversity that is wholly manufactured. It is melodrama at its finest. Todd Haynes would absolutely love it.
Yeah.
It is incredible, the melodrama with college football this season, especially surrounding my Wolverines. However, they pushed through the adversity, and not only did they beat Ohio State, but then they went on to win the Big Ten championship, which was a lot of fun. And I think because of having to overcome all of that adversity, it was really great. And I was looking forward to the moment where the Big Ten commissioner had to hand Jim Harbaugh the trophy.
What did
But
it? Yeah.
instead, like a coward, he left as soon as he could.
Of course he did.
Absolute coward, Tony Panini.
Because I was so looking forward to what that facial expression would have been. And
It would have been great.
We were not given that moment.
I was joking with my brother. Jim Harbaugh is a better man than I. There's no doubt about it. Because if it was me, I would have been extremely overtly petty about the whole thing. I would have made Tony Petitti look me in the eyes. I would have been smiling the whole time. I would have made comments on that mic where Fox would have had to cut the microphone.
Yeah.
He's getting out of control. And I probably would have said things that I regretted as a college football coach. But when Tony Petitti is going to be bullied by other teams in the league and go after you aggressively with no evidence whatsoever, I would have had fun with that. But Jim Harbaugh is a better man than that.
He'll do that off field. Yeah.
He's making a statement, certainly with his team on the field as well. And
honestly, the lack of a response that he actually acknowledged and the fact that he maintained a sense of diplomacy on camera is enough to piss people off even more.
Probably.
So if anything, that's even a bigger middle finger and a polite middle finger at that.
And, he did a nice thing, too, because he made it about the kids, right? So, like, Zach Zenter, who is one of Michigan's players on offense, he's the heart and soul of the offensive line. He broke his leg in 2 places last week against Ohio State. So, of course, he didn't play in the championship game. But he got on stage at the end, and he's the one that the commissioner handed the trophy to. So he made it not about himself, speaking of Jim. He put the players in front, and one of the players that is the heart and soul of the team that is unfortunately severely injured. It was just a really nice gesture. And so he did the right move by not being petty. And, it was hilarious to see the commissioner just book it out of there as fast as he could, like a goddamn coward that he is.
See audiences, JD is getting very cagey here.
I am. Yeah, so it was really great. And then the playoff selection was today, and Michigan was chosen as number 1 in the country. This is the first time they've been number one nationally since they won the national championship back in January of 1998, the season of 97.
Yeah.
So they haven't been number one in a long time. So, I mean, they have a lot to prove still. They got to win in the playoff for it to mean anything, but it's still pretty cool to be number one in the country. We're number one of the regular season.
It's kind of bittersweet, though, because on one hand, you know that you got there at number one, and you can arguably defend that was a rightful placement, right? But on the other end, I guess we need to acknowledge the Alabama of it all as well, too.
Yeah, okay. Before we get to that, though, real fast, I want to say a congratulations to our good friend Ryan McQuaid and his Texas Longhorns,
Texas, yeah,
getting in at number 3.
Number 3, yeah.
So they don't face each other in the first round, but if Michigan and Texas both win that first round, they will face each other in the national championship.
Oh, good thing Ryan's no longer here.
So him and I have been texting back and forth over the weekend about all of this, and that is an exciting proposal. But yes, a congratulations to Ryan and his Longhorns as well.
Yeah.
This is also close to home for me as well regarding Alabama, because they ended up pushing out Florida State, who is my wife's alma mater.
I was going to say, she's a Seminole.
She's a Seminole. She's a diehard Florida State fan. And it was exciting that both of our teams went 13-0, Michigan and Florida State. What are the chances of this? They both go 13-0. They both win their conference championship. So by all accounts, both of these teams should be in the playoff, maybe even facing off against each other. And what an incredible night that would have been in our household. And instead, that was stolen from us because they put in Alabama over Florida State. And it's just not right. It's not right.
I'm with you. Just because Alabama had one very crucial win against Georgia, right?
Yeah.
And they're putting a lot of weight into that. But that's a very, very biased weight, if you ask me. The Bama bias, as we like to jokingly call it. We sort of talked about that offline. It's a thing. It exists.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate because, Florida State they're not only undefeated, they're in a Power 5 conference. No undefeated Power 5 conference team has missed the playoff before. It's utterly insane. They earned it on the field. I know they lost their quarterback to this tragic, severe injury, and it's limited them on offense. And that's what all of this comes down to. Alabama gets in on a technicality because Florida State lost their All-American quarterback. If Jordan Travis doesn't get hurt, there's no debate here. Bama and the SEC get shut out because Texas is going to be there. They beat head-to-head. They beat Alabama in Tuscaloosa by double digits.
Yeah.
Texas is in. No matter what, no matter how it shakes out, they're in.
At this point, I think, you go ahead.
I was just going to say, if Florida State had Jordan Travis, there's no question Florida State is in there. So it comes down to a technicality, but you could argue that the last few weeks were more impressive that Florida State was able to still win despite being down to the third string quarterback in the championship game against Louisville. And they went on the road to Florida in the swamp and still won with their backup quarterback, which is no small feat. I know Florida's not that great this year, but
still, it's like what do you put weight on in order to justify what defines your 4 best teams in college football right
now? They
earned
it. Right? And I think part of the issue here is that's the wrong philosophy.
Well, and every time this happens, I find myself thinking, okay, so what is the criteria then? And I feel like I have to relearn the criteria here every single time.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing is like they want the best 4 teams because they view this as a product. And look, if this is going to be a product and it's about the sportsmanship of it all and the business end of it, then I'm okay with it. But if we're going to treat it like a business, then let's treat it like the professional sport that it is, and let's start paying these players for what they're worth. And I think that should be step one. if we're going to do it that way. But if we're going to treat it as college sports as we have been, then it's not about the best 4 teams. It's about what's happened on the field. The games have to matter. That's why Texas is in over Bama. And look, you're 13-0. I don't care what conference you're in. If you're in a Power 5 conference, you lose your quarterback. And look, a team is more than just its quarterback. It is everyone involved. They certainly proved that in the Louisville win. Florida State did. Their defense was electric, absolutely elite in that game, and they had to be. And you can't take that away. I also think, and this is probably going to get me in trouble with those in the South, but the reality of it is the SEC, and again, I know I'm going to get in trouble. That's okay. They were not that great this year. They were not as good as their reputation.
They have a passionate fan base and a very consistent track record that, of course, the NCAA wants to maintain that because there's marketability there, right?
Yeah, and look, they weren't nearly as good. As an entire conference, Brendan, take a guess at who, as a conference, not just a singular team. I'm not just talking Alabama or Georgia.
Right.
As a conference, their best non-conference win this year was against Louisville. Yes.
Yeah.
The same team that Florida State beat. Their best win as a conference was against Louisville. Georgia's best win was against Missouri.
Yeah.
LOL. And Alabama's best win was against Ole Miss until they beat Georgia.
Yep.
I'm sorry, but that conference wasn't nearly as great or as deep as they typically are. In fact, you look at Bill Connolly's S&P Plus model, and I'm a huge analytics guy. And the reason I'm a huge analytics guy is because math doesn't lie. People are emotional and extremely biased. You know, there's a reason why in a court of law, eyewitness testimony doesn't count for anything.
Yeah.
It is the least valuable asset that you can use in a court of law because people are emotional and they often get it wrong.
Well, that's why bias exists.
That's why bias exists. So the eye test, when we're talking about athletics, the eye test doesn't offer that much value because, again, people are emotional and people are biased.
You can't define that, right? That's why every year I find myself thinking, so what exactly is the criteria when the top 4 gets chosen at the end of the season? This is because I feel like you can argue the criteria changes every single year. Whether it's if it's a justified reason that actually makes mathematical sense or not. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. But I feel like I have to rethink what that is every single time, and that's not good. That shouldn't be the case.
And that's why it shouldn't come down to a committee. A committee can help, I guess, dictate certain things, but math has to be more of the equation, pun intended, I guess. That's what I love about Bill Connolly's S&P Plus and advanced metrics, because numbers don't lie. They don't care about your feelings. They don't care, whether you have a recent history and you're the SEC and you have this culture. It doesn't care about your feelings. The math is the math. And according to his algorithm, in the top 30 of his S&P Plus model, the ACC has 8 teams in the top 30. Guess how many the SEC has? 7.
Yeah.
The ACC actually has more teams in the top 30.
Yeah.
So again, people get emotional and there's a bias and there's, you get caught up in recency bias. Really, that's a lot of what this is, right? And look, I get it. Georgia, Alabama, the SEC has dominated for a long time, but this year, and the numbers, which don't care about your feelings and don't lie, they back this up.
Yeah. So I guess given this whole conversation here, because I've seen a lot of people go back and forth online, whether it be Facebook or Twitter /X, whatever you want to call it, trying to, I guess, redefine what they thought the top 4 should have been, right? And it sounds like from your perspective, Switch Bama with Florida State, and you think that's the justifiable top 4.
Absolutely.
And I'm kind of with you. I think Washington being where they are makes sense. Yeah, I'm happy to see
Florida State deserve to be there. And even in the advanced metrics models, like in S&P Plus rankings, Alabama and Florida State are right next to each other anyway.
Yeah, so who has the undefeated season then?
It's not as if the advanced metrics are like, oh yeah, Alabama and Georgia are way higher than everybody else. No, that's not the case at all, actually. Right. Not the case at all. I mean, they're a little bit more top heavy if we're talking conference to conference, the ACC to the SEC. But again, from the top 30, there's more teams from the ACC there. So like, again, I say that to say perspective matters. Context matters. And this year, the SEC isn't the gargantuan conference that people think it is because of their history. It's not. It's objectively, verifiably not.
It's lesser. And people are not willing to admit that yet.
And again, that's not to say Georgia and Alabama aren't worthy. They are. They're very good teams.
They're still very good teams. Yeah.
Very good teams. I say that to say Florida State, by the eye test, if you want to call it that, and I watched every single one of Florida State's teams, that defense is legit. Yeah. And Jordan Travis is one of the better quarterbacks in the country.
No, that I would agree with. Absolutely.
You could argue that he's the best of the 3 teams if we're talking Georgia, Alabama, and Florida State.
Yeah.
So they were a good team, and the metrics bear that out. They were as worthy as any other team in that top 8.
Yeah.
They were.
Yeah.
So, and when you consider they went undefeated, they deserve to be in. They got screwed.
They really.
So anyway, all of that to say, I'm waiting for the Todd Haynes melodrama around this.
Let's just hope they brought enough hot dogs.
Yeah, one could say. We'll get to May, December later.
Review
on
to
this
come.
Week, so
Review to come.
Be on the lookout for that. All right. On this episode, we're talking Nicolas Cage. Another review that we're going to get to here this week is Dream Scenario starring Nicolas Cage.
Yeah.
Have you seen it yet, Brendan? You haven't seen it yet.
Seeing it tomorrow.
Seeing it tomorrow.
Yeah.
Very curious to hear your thoughts on that when we get to it.
Yeah.
So with Nicolas Cage being front and center in that movie, and of course he's known for all kinds of performances in movies, we are going to have a Nicolas Cage character draft. That will be the bulk of this episode.
It'll be interesting with 2 people, but I'm really excited about that.
Yes, it's gonna be great. We're going to aim to do 10 rounds, so we might not get into all of these characters and why they're fantastic, but we're going to do a fun little character draft.
Yeah.
Before we get to that, though, a couple of notes here up front that I wanted to talk about. One of them, and we're going to argue here, we're going to get into a furious debate.
Oh, I see what you did there.
There was a new trailer for Furiosa that came out, and Brendan wrongfully didn't like it.
It's a crap trailer, dude. It's a crap trailer.
No. I will not stand for this.
Okay, well, let me first latch on to what I'm seeing with it. Now, again, it's hard judging and watching a trailer when you watch it on a laptop, right?
Sure.
And I will concede there's a good chance the visual effects work is not done yet.
Yeah, which is a lot of the case.
But what we're seeing visually just looks awful. To me, it looks awful. It really and here's the other thing that's bothering me, and maybe this is an unfair criticism because I recognize that this technically isn't a quote unquote Mad Max film, right?
Yeah.
It's a Mad Max saga film. It's a prequel. It's a prequel to Furiosa. She is the main character. Max is not even going to be in this movie as far as I understand, right?
Yep.
So perhaps that's why tonally, as a sensory experience, it feels very much in line with Fury Road, right? Like it feels very much like an extension of that. But I'm someone that loves how every Mad Max film thus far has felt so different from the other one. And we are, at this point when this movie comes out, 9 years removed from Fury Road. I guess I wish that there would have been more time from George Miller's point of view to get a little creative and recreate the world once again. Mm-hmm. And I feel like what he's doing is not that. So to me, what I saw was a lazy trailer. It just, to me, it just looked like I was seeing cutscenes, unfinished scenes from Fury Road. That's all it felt like to me. Now, let me say this. Am I still excited for the movie? Yes, I am, because I love the casting. I still love George Miller. I think he's a madman, and I think he's an awesome madman. But this trailer didn't do it for me. It just didn't.
Okay. Well, I wholeheartedly disagree.
Doesn't happen very often. We gotta whenever we disagree like this, we gotta find time to talk about it.
Yeah, I think it looks pretty great. Now, I do admit, I will concede, there does seem to be more visual effects at play than what we saw with Fury Road, which did have a lot of visual effects, but much of it was hidden because we knew so much of the stunt work was practical.
For sure.
And the setting was so immersive that you didn't really notice or pay attention to the visual effects as much. And you do feel that a little bit more here. I will concede to that, but to your point, maybe it's because the effects
they're not done yet. Yeah, and
wholly rendered at this point.
Yeah, and I do hope, in a way, like maybe if this gets me into the I mean, I'm going to see it regardless, but if anything's going to get me excited, it's going into the theater and saying, "Oh God, this actually does look amazing." Okay, I was wrong, and I want to have that experience.
Yeah, I will say though, I thought visually it looked quite wonderful. Even if there's more visual effects, I guess more front and center, I still think it looks pretty great. And yes, it is an extension from Fury Road, so it's going to have a similar color palette. The action seems to be regurgitating a lot of the same style. But again, I'm okay with it because it's an extension of that world. So to a degree, I'm expecting it. I think there's a level of us wanting that because the action of that film is so spectacular and spellbinding that we want to experience that again. The story does seem very different. Maybe where I'm coming at this with any hesitation whatsoever is from the storytelling side of it, because this trailer, while we don't know too much, it does seem to suggest that it's going to be more plot heavy than Fury Road. I love that Fury Road is really simple in that regard.
It's a 2-hour chase scene. That's what that movie is.
It allows for more character and its themes and symbolism to really come to the surface in a really great way. Sure. And that could be the case here. I don't know. Obviously, it's a teaser and we don't get too much out of this trailer, but it just seems as if there's more plot here. And again, maybe I'm wrongfully inferring based off of the trailer here, but it just, that's, again, my only question mark at this point. Visually speaking, though, I think it looks a lot like Mad Max Fury Road, and I think that's a good thing. I don't see that as a bad thing at all.
And maybe I'm just being unfair with what I'm hoping for a film that's still within this saga in some way, because every Mad Max film has felt like some type of stylistic reinvention for action cinema, right? Like when Fury Road came out, that was a big deal. And whether you love every Mad Max film that came before, every time one came out, there was something to behold with regard to its action filmmaking. Like Beyond Thunderdome, I don't think is a great movie, but that final chase at the end is spectacular. There are times I think it might be the best scene of any Mad Max film. It is so well choreographed. And that happens every time. So to see a trailer for Furiosa and to see it just feeling like an extension of something we've seen before, I guess maybe secretly I'm hoping for some type of challenging aspect to it as far as the action filmmaking is concerned.
And we might
still get that. Yeah. I just, am I seeing that in this trailer yet? Not quite. But then again, on that same token, if George Miller is going for something that bold and daring visually, he might not want to showcase it all just yet. He wants to share that in the theater when we see it for the first time. And I at least sympathize with that if that's the case.
Absolutely. And I'm curious for that as well. I will say though, if it's simply an aesthetic extension of Fury Road, I'm also okay with it because of how grandiose and distinct that movie is. There was an interview of Steven Soderbergh that was going around Twitter today. I don't know if you saw this or not, but I do think
I don't think it
helps
did.
articulate why I think this is okay. This is a blurb from an interview. I'm not exactly sure where. I'd have to find it and maybe put it out on social media. But in this interview, he said, I just watched Mad Max Fury Road again last week, and I tell you, I couldn't direct 30 seconds of that. I'd put a gun in my mouth. I don't understand how George Miller does that. I really don't. And it's my job to understand it. I don't understand two things. I don't understand understand how they're not still shooting that film, and I don't understand how hundreds of people aren't dead. End quote.
And knowing the history of making Fury Road and how much of a production disaster it kind of was, and the fact that it came out like it did, and Steven Soderbergh is a guy that he's kind of like a David Fincher in some ways, as far as someone that just needs to have some level of control, right? Like there's a precision to his films. He's right. He could never make a Fury Road. I don't think I'd ever want Soderbergh to try and make something at the level of Fury Road, because and that's not to say he's an incapable director. He's got a certain type of precision that lends itself to very certain films. Fury Road is not one of them. So but I love those
point
comments.
In all of that has nothing to do with whether he could direct that or not.
Oh, I know.
It's to emphasize that only George Miller could direct that film in the way that he did. And Steven Soderbergh is just blown away that hundreds of people aren't dead for making that movie, because it's so insane and wild.
That's such a hilarious comment.
Who doesn't want to re-experience that is my point. And I absolutely would love to have that again. So if it's nothing more than a regurgitation of Mad Max Fury Road, but it's also great and spectacular and just as engrossing, I will not be complaining about it. I'll just say that.
Yeah, I don't think I'll be complaining either, but at the same time, I would sit back and think, it obviously wasn't trying to be better than Fury Road then. And I guess that's fine. I guess maybe that's the thing. I have to separate this film from being a Mad Max film and being just a Mad Max extension of a film, which is more or less what it's functioning as by the tagline there being a Mad Max saga, right?
Yeah.
So it is meant to separate itself as its own thing. Again, if I call it a crap trailer, maybe it's because the trailer is giving me stuff that I don't necessarily want to see out of it. I wanted to see it push the boundary a little bit more as far as its visual palette and its action filmmaking, and it's not doing that. And if I can accept that it's not doing that because that's the ultimate point, then I'll probably be able to get on board with it.
Yeah, and I don't know who the executives are that greenlit this, specifically the executives. I know Village Roadshow is the production company, and Warner Brothers is distributing this. Right. However, I assume whoever the suits are told him, we will gladly give you $200 million, whatever the budget was for this. We will gladly do that, but we need it to look like Mad Max.
Mad
Max. We need to be able to market this film around that aesthetic. And he said, I will gladly take your money. Thank you. And I imagine that he's going to end up doing something great with this because he's a fantastic director.
Yeah.
And I'm excited to see what he does. It's just one little teaser.
True.
Doesn't really give us much. Again, even my concerns about its storytelling, that could be myopic because this trailer doesn't give us much. I'm inferring based off of images that I see.
It could
looks
be
a little bit more plot heavy, but it might not be.
Well, and anything that's plot heavy about it could just be the first 20 minutes, and then we just get another action sequence for the rest of its 2-hour runtime.
Exactly. It could all be in the first 15 minutes, for sure.
Yeah.
So those concerns might not mean anything. That's why it's a question mark at this point. Aside from that, I'm excited. Anya Taylor-Joy looks the part. Chris Hemsworth especially looks the part.
That was interesting. I didn't even know it was him at first. That took me off guard.
I just love that. Look, and I love him as Thor, right? We've had this talk here on the show several times, especially even over the last few weeks. I love him as Thor. I will defend his performance as Thor. However, some of these roles outside of the MCU have been really intriguing. And I do love how he's embracing the bizarre nature of this world and just really going for it here.
Yeah.
Yes, I can't wait to see him in this world. It's going to be great.
Oh, I can't either. Yeah. And I need to make this clear once again. When I come down on a trailer like I am here, that doesn't mean I'm not excited for the movie. Like I'm going to be there opening day. I really am. I'm looking forward to this like you cannot believe. Even if the trailer does nothing for me, the movie, the mere existence of the movie does something for me. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, I felt the same way about Dune. I didn't like the trailers that much for Dune when that movie first came out, and I was still excited for the movie, right? But like trailers mean nothing. They don't affect my excitement for a movie. I like to judge them as their own like marketing or like their own forms of artistic marketing, right? That's usually how I try and judge them.
Yeah. Moving on to the next segment here. And maybe this is a film that you and I aren't looking forward to as much, but I do find it intriguing. And I think it's because we talked about this earlier in the year, I believe. I'm not exactly sure what episode it was. I'd have to look it up. Because I find this interesting because we're getting a sequel to a movie, but it's completely recontextualized or retconned slightly because of what came on the DVD. And I don't know if we've seen that before. I posed that as a question earlier in the year. I'm, of course, speaking of Will Smith and his announcement last week about I Am Legend.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because, and this is, I guess, a little well known. I don't know how widely well known it is. I did see some remarks that people weren't aware of the alternate ending on the DVD.
Right.
But there's an alternate ending on the DVD where Will Smith's character of Robert Neville, he survives. And he makes it to the safe haven, whatever it's called. I can't remember.
Yeah, well, the alternate ending, which many people prefer, and admittedly I do prefer it as well. It's actually a much darker ending because it suggests that Will Smith's character was the bad guy this whole time. That these creatures actually did have their own conscience, right?
Yeah.
Even though he felt like they didn't. In many ways, it basically means that what he had just done was created a new species of not superhuman, but a new extension of humanity that saw him that eventually then saw him as a threat to their livelihood.
Yeah.
Which it's an interesting ending. It wasn't the ending that was in theaters, and to your point, as far as I understand it, you rent the movie on, let's say, Amazon Prime, you're still getting the theatrical film.
Yes.
This isn't like with Blade Runner, right? Where the director's cut and then now the final cut have been engraved into that film's legacy, right? That's not how that's not what's happening here with I Am Legend. That's where I think this is going to get confusing. Unless the push with I Am Legend 2 is to replace every digital copy of I Am Legend on every streaming platform with the new one with the alternate ending, then maybe it'll work. I don't know. But I feel like that work hasn't been done yet.
I'm curious if that does come to fruition at some point. And based off of what I've read before, I could be misremembering here, but I think the alternate ending was initially the original ending, but it didn't do well in test screenings, which is why I think they ended up cutting it and changing it for the theatrical cut.
It was either test screenings or some suit and black tie person at the studio that just said, this is too dour, we need to change it.
We got to change it. Yeah, perhaps that's the case. I'm not entirely sure. Either way, I find it fascinating because, again, unless there's something that I'm just not recalling here off the cuff, I don't know if we've ever seen a sequel like this where it's obviously a sequel to a movie that we've seen before, but the DVD version of it, not the theatrical version of it. And they're taking that explicitly as the creative roots for the sequel.
The only comparison I can think of are many of these legacy sequels that have disregarded other films in their franchise. Like, let's say the Halloween trilogy, right? Which technically acts as a direct sequel to the first Halloween, right? So like I think that's the closest example I can think of. But even
those
that
are still deriving from other films that were in
Right.
theaters,
right, exactly.
not redistributed DVD versions.
Right,
You know
right.
what I mean? So like, again, I could be wrong here, but is this a first of its kind in that regard? I don't know, but that makes
Maybe.
me intrigued in this project.
That's the one thing that has me intrigued by this project is what they're going to do to tie it to that alternate ending that many people might not even be aware of yet.
Yeah.
So like
and how are they
maybe-
going to market that? Because what if you haven't seen it? And what if you don't have a DVD copy of it, to your point earlier?
What I hope they don't do is take the easy way out by simply just making I Am Legend 2, and what they simply do is put that alternate ending in that movie as a prologue and then start the movie from there. That's what I hope they don't do.
Would not be surprised if that's what happens.
Well, that just seems like the lazy way to go about it.
I agree. Unless they redistribute I Am Legend in theaters beforehand.
Would they be
And
willing to do that kind of
especially-
money for that movie?
I mean, I don't know. I'm just spitballing here. I don't know.
Okay, obviously I can't speak for everyone. And I'm not sure how you even feel about the movie, JD. The original I Am Legend, which, what was that, 2007? I think that came out.
to that
Something
effect,
like
yeah.
that. Yeah, I think the movie's okay. I think it's fine.
I like it. I like
Okay,
it.
you might like it more than I do. Because yeah, as a project, I Am Legend 2 specifically, I don't really care. If I'm being perfectly honest, it doesn't really excite me, the fact that we're getting a sequel to this movie. I'm more intrigued by just the mechanics of it all, right? Like the
Yeah.
technicalities of it.
Yeah, I mean, as material goes, I agree. It's not like it's going to be one of my most anticipated films whenever it comes out.
Same.
But I did like I Am Legend enough. I thought it was good. Will Smith, very committed to his performance there. A little bit of an emotional performance. I didn't really have too much of an issue with the theatrical ending, but I didn't have any context of what the alternate version would be. So, honestly, I don't even. I'm sure I've seen the alternate ending. It's not really coming to mind.
Yeah.
But
I wonder if I Am Legend 2 will also be directed by Francis Lawrence, if he's going to be coming back. Because I feel like now
Yeah,
all
that's a
he's
good
been
point.
doing
just going back
are
to his old property.
yeah, because we just got the Hunger Games, and then we already know he's doing Constantine 2. At least that's been talked about. So
Might as well.
Might-
Come on back. He's
And
making the 2020s his 2000s all over again.
and it's funny because I actually think his best movie, looking at his filmography here, might actually be Red Sparrow.
I did like Red Sparrow. Yeah. So like, anyway, long story short, I liked I Am Legend. It's nothing spectacular by any means, but I certainly liked it enough at the time. And I'm intrigued by this because of the mechanics of it, as you're talking about. And
Yeah,
Michael
same.
B. Jordan is tapped to be in this film as well, how he's going to have a role here.
Yeah, not sure what character he'll be playing, if any relation to Will Smith's character. I'm not really sure.
Yeah. So we shall see. But yeah, I do find that really intriguing. One last thing here real fast. We don't have to spend a lot of time here because we do want to get to Nick Cage. However, Kevin Feige came out today and was very adamant. Brendan, you're wrong. He's not coming back. RDJ is not coming back to the MCU. And you were like,
I don't believe it.
I don't know.
I am reminded of Andrew Garfield once again. I didn't get a call.
I mean, to be fair, what else is he gonna say? He was told not to say anything, and people kept asking him.
I know. I mean, it better. I mean, it's good news because I hope he's right. I hope that's what ends up being the case. Just at this point now, I wouldn't be surprised if he's lying through his teeth.
But you are right, though. We all knew Andrew Garfield was coming back. We
Yeah.
knew it. It was going to happen. But legally he had to say he wasn't.
Mhm.
So he
Mhm.
lied through his teeth.
Yeah.
And you're right. I mean, that could very much be the case here as well. There is something about Kevin Feige's comments, though, that I do think are very, very true. At least I hope they're true. And I think creatively, he should stick to his convictions in that regard. Because essentially, if you don't know, if you're watching or listening and don't know, he basically said, and I'm paraphrasing here, that there was a lot of people involved in the creation of that character throughout the years and especially into Infinity War and Endgame.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of heart poured into it, and we don't want to undermine, the way that character went out.
Yeah.
And something that you and I have talked about here on the show as well. That's why we don't want to see Iron Man come back, because he went out on the best note possible. So he is right. He is right. They should stick to their convictions. Iron Man, at least RDJ's version of it, went out on the best note possible. So if you're going to bring back Tony Stark, it has to be within the multiverse, and the MCU has established this already. It doesn't have to look the same. You can recast that character, bring in someone else, and do it that way.
For sure.
That's the only way this works.
Yeah.
So I want to believe him. He should be sticking to his convictions, but will he, to your point? I don't know. It's hard to say.
If I had a prediction here, do I think we're going to see Tony Stark and Iron Man come back in the MCU? Yes.
Yes.
I do. Do I think it'll be that Tony Stark? No, I don't.
Yeah.
Will it still be played by Robert Downey Jr.? Maybe. I don't know. But if would I be surprised if Downey Jr. does come back to play some variant of Tony Stark?
Yeah.
No, I would not be surprised.
I wouldn't be surprised either. I think it might depend on, because we have a few years before we get to the Avengers movies, right?
Yeah.
Of this phase. What if he has a similar trajectory as The Rock did, right? Where he's trying to do his own thing. I'm not going back to Fast and Furious. I'm not going to. I'm going to go out on my own path. I don't need those guys anymore.
Yeah.
Well, this fails. Black Adam fails. This doesn't do well. Oh, you know what I'm doing next? I'm doing Moana live action, and I'm coming back to Fast and Furious, baby.
Yeah.
He's going back to the gold mine because his path didn't work all that great.
That's the big difference, because sadly, Dwayne Johnson doesn't have an Oppenheimer in him right now.
He does. No. But like, he tried to create his own path. He tried to embrace Black Adam and reinvent the DCEU. And it didn't work out all that great. So I'm going back to the gold mine, baby. Because that's the only reason he's back in Fast and Furious. The only reason is because his path didn't work out that great and he needs a win. If Robert Downey Jr. post Oppenheimer, because obviously Oppenheimer was a huge success.
Yeah.
Not the film, not just the film, but him and his role in it. He might end up at least being nominated for an Oscar. Who knows if he wins an Oscar? He clearly has a W with that one. But, it took a minute to get there, right? Because didn't he have a couple of losses with some other Disney, like the, what was the Disney film that he did a few years ago?
Doolittle?
That one bombed.
Yeah.
Did not do all that great. And I want to say that maybe there was another one in there. I'm not sure.
Well, the fact that we can't think of it is proving your point, right?
Exactly. So
I'm going to look this up as we're talking.
Oppenheimer obviously did great. But if the next one moving forward, maybe that fails, if he has another Doolittle, another couple of Doolittles.
Here's the reason why we can't think of anything, JD, because you look at his filmography as an actor. 2019, obviously, Avengers Endgame, right? 2020, Doolittle. And guess what his next film was after that? Oppenheimer.
Okay.
So there was a 3-year gap where we didn't see Downey Jr. And, I guess it kind of makes sense given, his relationship with his father and everything in that movie Senior that came out. So
the
there was
documentary was awesome.
Yeah. So there was more attention, emotionally speaking, dedicated to that. And honestly, like if there's a break in any actor's career, that makes sense. Right. And not to say that we're pro or against an actor taking a break, but seeing that documentary come out in between all of that. Yeah, I get it. I get it.
I completely agree. And look, I don't want to necessarily put too much emphasis on Doolittle. That obviously didn't do great, but Oppenheimer, obviously fantastic, and Senior is an excellent documentary.
I'm with you.
It was one of the best docs of last year.
Yeah.
And you gotta love the artistic prowess of that. So I do think he's on a winning streak here. And I think knowing him as an artist and where he is now in his life, it wouldn't surprise me at all if in the next few years he continues this trend and he has more Oppenheimers in him and less of the Doolittles. I'm just saying, if he comes back as Iron Man, it's going to be because he has some big L's, some more Doolittles, if you will, and he needs something to get him back on the right path.
And looking at his upcoming films right now that are in production, or even some of his television work, I think he's going to have more hits than not. I know he's going to be in a new TV miniseries called The Sympathizer, which is sort of like this wartime thriller, and one of the major directors of it is Park Chan-wook.
Oh,
so
nice.
So he's working with talent. He really is. I don't know if I could say the same thing about Dwayne Johnson.
Okay, yeah, and I think that I read that he's looking to reunite with Shane Black for an upcoming film, I believe, as well.
I think he wants to reunite with Guy Ritchie for a Sherlock Holmes 3, and while I don't love those movies, like that at least is a good utilization of his acting abilities, I feel like.
I love him in those movies.
I like him in those movies too. If anything, it's the Guy Ritchie-isms that I don't love about those movies.
Which is fair. Totally fair. But yeah, Downey is amazing as that character, though.
Yeah, I love the banter he has with Jude Law. So if they both do come back, that'd be fun.
And they've been talking about doing a third film for a decade now.
Yeah.
So make that happen. Yes, I would absolutely love to see that. If he's going to come back to a franchise, I guess I would prefer that one than the MCU at this point. But that is to say, I'm very optimistic for RDJ moving forward. So, and that's why I don't think he's going to come back to the MCU. I don't think he needs to.
He doesn't need to. At least at this point, I think we can assume he doesn't need it.
So, I mean, I agree with you that his version of the character is gone. If the character comes back into the MCU, I think you can simply recast Tony Stark to someone else. A young and up-and-coming actor.
Well, Marvel is probably hoping to play that card, right? Where somewhere in, let's say, Secret Wars, or because from what I understand, the Kang Dynasty is being morphed into Secret Wars Part 1. I've heard that they're trying to do something like that, but listeners out there, correct me if I'm wrong. I could be hearing something completely incorrect there. But Marvel wants to save a specific moment where Iron Man in the familiar Mark II suit comes flying in with that classic theme, and the face shield opens up, and it's someone completely different, right? Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, it's a la that moment in when, I guess, who came first? It was which Spider-Man came first? I'm trying to recall here. I can't remember. Was it Tobey Maguire? Did he come first?
You mean as far as appearances in No Way Home? That was Andrew Garfield. He was the first to appear. Yeah.
So I got it backwards. I was trying to think which one came first. But yeah, because you see the silhouette first, right?
Yeah.
So it's a little bit of that same thing where there's a figure there, someone is there, but we don't know who. As an audience, we're anticipating that it's one of the two. Yeah. But it's not until Andrew Garfield walks through the portal that you're like, oh my God, it's his version of Peter Parker. And that's, so it's not like they haven't done this before.
Right.
And you're right. I could absolutely see that being the case where he flies in and Black Sabbath is playing or something to that effect.
Oh,
and the thing opens and, hey, it's
Maybe it's Tom Cruise or something like that. Who was one? Yeah,
That would be great. Not gonna happen, but that would be funny.
yeah.
All right, Brandon, let's talk about coffee. It is the best drink on the planet.
It is. Oh man, the best mornings. The best
We
mornings
need
come
it.
with coffee.
Everybody drinks coffee one way or another. And if you're going to drink coffee, you might as well drink the best coffee. That's why we love Coffee Cult,
Absolutely.
because they source specialty grade Arabica coffee only.
Mhm.
And the thing is, what differentiates Coffee Cult from other coffee companies that
Yep.
use specialty grade is that they are very meticulous about the beans that they roast. They don't just get bags of specialty grade, because when you get a bag of specialty grade coffee, some of the beans are pristine,
Yeah.
perfectly shaped, no defects whatsoever. However, some of them do carry defects. Maybe half of a bean,
Yeah.
some of it's darkened. It's not great. Like there's a mixture in the bag.
Yeah.
And that's what a lot of companies will roast. They'll take that specialty grade coffee as is, baby. And sometimes they'll blend that with Robusta coffee, which tastes like garbage.
Yep.
But
It's
cheapens,
quicker. It's easier. Meets
quicker,
demand.
easier. Absolutely. Where Coffee Cult doesn't do that. They only roast the pristine specialty grade coffee. So
Absolutely.
the quality is unmatched. There just isn't
Yeah.
a whole lot of coffee companies that have this flavor profile, the texture, the elite qualities that come with Coffee Cult coffee. So you have to check it out. It's ethically sourced coffee as well. That's a big thing. It's roasted to order, so the coffee's not just sitting around getting stale in some warehouse somewhere. It's roasted to order, so it's guaranteed fresh every single time. This time of year, they have a holiday blend that is just perfection. It will give you that festive Christmas spirit. It's absolutely spectacular coffee.
Yeah, I was gonna say, if there's anything that you care about when it comes to your coffee, you just want it to taste good, right?
Exactly.
And here it is. And correct me if I'm wrong, JD. There's a bourbon blend.
There's a
out there.
bourbon blend, absolutely.
Oh, man.
Where these beans, they sat in Willet and Four Roses bourbon barrels, authentic bourbon barrels, for months at a time.
Yeah.
Just handcrafting it, rotating it,
Oh,
making sure that all that bourbon flavor gets into the bean. And it is.
And JD and I, we met in the state of Kentucky, the good state of Kentucky.
We know a good bourbon.
Yeah, Coffee Cult made this one for us. They knew our history. It's like, this is for you.
Yep, that's exactly where those barrels came from, was the Bourbon Trail in Kentucky. So it's a great coffee. Definitely go and check it out. Go to coffeecult.com. That's coffee with a K, cult with a K, coffeecult.com. Use our code ISF. Again, that code is ISF, and you'll get 15% off your order. So again, 15% off, our code ISF at coffeecult.com. All right, Brendan, we need to talk about podcasting. We do it.
We have
We
one.
love it.
We have one. And
We have one.
It's not an easy job sometimes.
No, it's not. But if you want to podcast, you're going to need a service to host it.
Absolutely.
And that's why we love Libsyn. Libsyn is fantastic. We've used them since the beginning, all the way back in 2013. And it's great. There's various levels as far as like how much you podcast and how much you want to host. But this is a podcasting service that has 75,000, 100,000 podcasts worldwide. It's a combination of liberated and syndication.
Yeah.
They have all the tools you'll need, not just to upload, but to market, to get ads, to to make money off your podcast,
to track results, see what's working, what's not. It helps with the analytics as well. It's so JD, I've had many friends, or at least a few as of late, come to me saying, I'm thinking of starting my own podcast. What do you guys do? What do you recommend? I usually just reply back with one word, and that word is Libsyn.
Libsyn, absolutely. They're fantastic because it can be overwhelming, especially if you don't know what you need to do. Like, how do I get my show up on Apple Podcast? How do I get it up on Spotify? They will walk you through that entire process. It's very easy to do. And again, they'll give you all the stats that you need. If you need to syndicate the show, like they have everything covered.
Yeah, they do.
So you definitely want to check these guys out. And if you go to Libsyn.com, you'll get 2 free months. Your first 2 months will be free when you use our code ISF. Again, that code is ISF, and you'll get your first 2 months of podcasting for free. It's a great deal.
It's a wonderful deal.
Libsyn.com, LIBSYN, Libsyn.com. All right. Shall we get to Nicolas Cage?
Let's get to Cage. Let's get cagey here.
Let's get a little bit cagey.
Let's get out of our cages.
Let's go ahead and do this. We're going to do a character draft. We're going to do 10 rounds of this. So we won't talk in depth about all of these characters and performances. We don't have the time. We would be here for 3.5 hours.
Yeah. And it's we were originally going to do 5, right, JD? That was going to be our threshold, mostly given how much we talk about any pick that we pick for any list, right? This will, for one thing, this will force us to practice a little bit of brevity. Yeah. But at the same time, where we each have to pick 10, then we can start picking among the really fun crap within Nicolas Cage's filmography. And that's where I think this will get interesting.
Okay. Yes. Yeah. So I'm very much there with you on that. And I can't wait to get into this. So to determine who goes first, I have a coin that I'm going to
perfect.
flip.
You have a digital coin. All right.
A digital coin. So do you want to call it heads or tails?
I'll call it. I'll call it right now before you flip it. Tails never fails, so I'm going tails.
Tails never fails. Here we go. And it is flipping. It is flipping. It is heads.
So I guess just this one time.
Yep. And I'm going to take a screenshot of this so I don't get in trouble.
I trust you.
In case anyone asks. But it was heads. So yes. Are we going to do this snake style?
For only 2 people, maybe not.
No. Okay.
Unless you want to. I'm perfect. Actually, you know what? Why not? Let's do it snake style.
Okay. Yeah, totally up to you. You and I, clearly Brendan and I didn't talk about this too much.
Well, I mean, I think it's fun when we do exercises like this without any planning. So this way the audience can actually hear how our brains operate from a logistical side of things.
Exactly. Okay. So I will go first, and you do want to snake it?
Let's snake it. And I guess to be clear, we're picking Nicolas Cage characters, but I guess do we want to at least have similar criterias going in? Like, are you basing it off of performance as well? Like the Nicolas Cage isms of it that we want to try and focus on too?
So that is really interesting, right? Because a lot of this, to your point, will come down to perspective, how you look at these lists and determine whose one carries more weight, because is it the iconicness of the character? Is it the performance of it? The legacy of it? It could be a lot of those things. When I came into this wanting, I guess, to bridge that gap a little bit.
Yeah. Okay.
Where I wanted, like my attack on this was to, I guess, pick the characters that I do think are his best, or that at least offer up some of his best performances, have some sort of legacy though, and also channel quintessential Nick Cage.
Yeah.
It's the only way I could describe it, I guess.
Yeah.
No, I think you all know what I mean by that.
Yeah. So yeah, you're trying to find some middle ground between all of those attributes, right?
Yeah.
And I'm okay. So we're more or less in the same camp here. So performance will definitely be a part of that. The iconic nature of the character, maybe how the character fits within the realm of that particular film, like all of those things will be factors here. Okay, I'm with you.
Absolutely. That's how I approach this. So,
okay,
leading off here, it won't be the most iconic, but again, I think it is quintessential middle ground.
Who are you going to pick?
I'm going with
I think
adaptation.
Okay. That's where I thought you were going to go. Okay. So in this case, okay. You have to go characters for this one.
Yes. Characters here. Adaptation. And again, I can't spend 7 minutes on this, but it's just, it is quintessential Cage. You get a little bit of the manic energy of Cage, but the psychology behind it all is fascinating. And you have the dynamic of the brothers. And I think this is, of his more artistically driven work, this is one of his most memorable. I think people do think of Nicolas Cage in this movie synonymously. And it's obviously one of his very best performances. So
yeah.
I to me, it was the perfect middle ground. It doesn't have the blockbuster energy that come with some of his others that we'll certainly get to, I imagine. But to me, it was the perfect middle ground. So I wasn't sure if I was going to go first or not, but if I did, that's it. That's number one for me.
Man, I struggled because I was thinking, if I am going to go number one here, if I'm going to go first in this draft, I would have probably gone with Charlie and Donald Kaufman as well. But at the same time, I think, like, is that the most representative Nicolas Cage character and performance? And I think in our circles, it certainly is. So yeah, I think that's a wise pick. I probably would have done the same thing.
Okay, so off to you for the next two then.
For the next two. All right. So looking at my list here, I have 3 that I want to go for right now. So which 2 do I go? Okay, you know what? Here's what I'll do. For my number 1, I'm going to go with H.M. McDonough from Raising Arizona.
Oh, man. Yeah. Love that. Okay.
Yeah, as far as his comedic performances are concerned, that's definitely high on the list. And the fact that it's from a Coen Brothers film, I think that also gives it kind of an edge as far as the if we're trying to make lists that are marketable, right? That garner votes and attention, which we are going to plaster this on social media, right, JD? We're going to get some votes for this. We're going to see what people think, who has the best draft. And I think as far as comedic performances, this is one of Nick Cage's most iconic, and it's a tender one too. I think the elements of fatherhood depicted here are very good, shows how much range that he has as an actor. So yeah, H.I. McDonough, I'm going to pick for my first pick here. And to keep the train going, since we're snaking around, I guess I'll pick my second pick now. I'll pick what I think might be, at the very least, my favorite Nick Cage performance. I'm going to go with the character of Rob from Pig.
Oh, man. Yes. Yeah, I think that was going to be part of my next one.
We're getting heavy hitters out of the way. Already with these 3 picks, we're showcasing one of the most versatile actors of all time, right?
Yeah, for sure. Pig would have been one of my next 2 picks for sure.
There's one that I thought you were going to pick first for some reason. I won't say what it is, but I expect you to take it pretty soon.
Yeah. Do love me some Pig, though. One of his best performances, hands down. It doesn't quite have the... It doesn't quite reach pop Nick Cage quite yet.
No.
I don't think. But in our circles, for sure. People will definitely be aware of that performance. That's quite fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay. So I got 2 here that I'm very high on. All right. So the next one I'm going to go with here, and this is a little recency bias as well, since I couldn't take Pig. I'm going to go with Red Miller from Mandy.
God damn you.
Yes, love Mandy. Again, it is Nick Cage at his very best in terms of the emotional prowess that he can depict, the manic craziness. Everyone thinks of that moment in the car when he almost looks directly into the camera.
This
is so good.
I almost feel like I could argue this is the most Nicolas Cage performance, because you get every facet of him as an actor in this one movie. Everything that he is so good at, and he balances it very well. It's a very tonally balanced performance, despite the extremes of it, because you get, as you said, the cagey side of Nick Cage and the artful side of Nick Cage, and then you get
all of it. Yeah,
you get all of it. Yeah, and it's effective.
I agree. So, love Mandy, great movie. My third pick here, and I believe this is the one that Brennan was alluding to. Maybe not though. Stanley Goodspeed.
That is the one I was alluding
Bay's
to.
The Rock. This might be, maybe this is a little bit of a hot take. I don't know. But this is my favorite comedic performance from Nick Cage. He is hilarious. And I think part of it is, because you watch him in something like the Coen brothers, and on the page, it is clearly very funny.
Yeah.
The Coens are spectacular writers, obviously, and that comes through in their characters and in Cage's performance for sure, something like Raising Arizona. The Rock is, of course, a Michael Bay action film.
Yeah.
Michael Bay's movies, not known for their writing.
No.
And the humor of his films are very intentional. Oftentimes, Bay's humor is hit or miss for sure.
Yeah.
It depends on the movie, because I think the humor in something like Armageddon is actually quite good as well. But I like the humor in The Rock. And some of it is on the page, but some of it is just Nicolas Cage. Like, there's a moment in this film when he's describing what this toxic substance can do. And you read it on the page, there's nothing comedic about it. He's talking about how if this liquid gets out and you are in the range of its effects, your body will start to spasm. Your back will essentially snap in half and your guts will spill out and your skin will melt off. That's what's written on the page. So you read it and you're like, oh my God, this is absolutely horrifying. But then you hear that come through in his performance and it is utterly hysterical. It is really funny how he takes something that is so bleak and pragmatic in terms of what this thing can do and makes it absolutely hilarious. It's just amazing.
Yeah.
And of course, he's got a great dynamic in that film with really all of those.
Oh yeah, Sean Connery,
but
especially
Sean Connery.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's great. To me, it might not be his most, I don't know. He's got some pretty popular 90s output.
Well,
Face Off might be his most popular. Con Air is very much in that conversation. I don't know if Stanley Goodspeed is the best or the most popular, but to me, it is the most quintessential 90s Cage.
I needed some 90s Cage on my list. I really did. And the one I wanted to go for was Stanley Goodspeed from The Rock for those reasons, because it is solely Nicolas Cage through and through, right?
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
So transitioning to my next pick here, if I am going to pick my 90s Nick Cage, I will then go to Castor Troy from Face Off. That'll be my next pick here, my third pick on my list. And I do think Face Off is a much better movie than The Rock. But if I'm trying to judge this as a Nick Cage list, especially Nick Cage characters, so much of what makes Castor Troy interesting in this movie is also due to John Travolta and the interplay between those two wild performances from both these actors. But at the same time, I have to give Cage a lot of credit in this movie for actually giving two completely different performances and making it work. And he's unhinged enough in the opening third when Castor Troy is still played by Nick Cage that he leaves an impression. Like that whole like sing-along sequence where he's dressed as a priest, I think it is kind of one of those memeable moments for Nick Cage. So yeah, I do think Stanley Goodspeed is perhaps a more full through Nicolas Cage performance and character. But I think Castor Troy is not a far second, at the very least, as far as action films from the 90s are concerned.
Yeah, can't go wrong with Face Off. That would be the movie I would guess would be his most popular. I feel like if we did a poll is like your favorite Cage performance from the 90s, I think that would win.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's just a guess, but I think that's
I think so. Well, I just think it's the better movie of the bunch. I don't necessarily think it's, I mean, I love the Nick Cage performance and the Nick Cage attributes of it. But again, I think there's something about what he does in The Rock that could be a bit more cagey as far as this list is concerned. Yeah. So it's hard. It's really difficult. All right. So I just picked my number 3 there with Castor Troy from Face Off. So what do I do next? This is where it gets fun. This is where it gets tricky. Because I want to try and stagger this between different like types of films and types of performances to showcase the range of Nick Cage. So, you know what? I'm gonna jump the gun a little bit on one that's probably gonna get me in trouble, but I'm gonna do it anyway. I'm gonna go with Spider-Man Noir from Into the Spider-Verse.
Oh my! I did not see that coming at all.
I didn't think I was gonna do that early, but you know what? He actually leaves an impression for very little dialogue and very little time in that movie, right?
Mhm.
It's and again, maybe I'm picking it too because the Spider-Verse movies are so top of mind at the moment. So yeah, but I do think like his battle with a Rubik's cube or not a Rubik's cube, right?
Mhm.
Is I just think it's hilarious. I just
It's
think that's
good.
absolutely hilarious. So he takes advantage of little dialogue, little screen time to make an iconic character out of that, at least as far as animated superhero movies are concerned. So yeah, Spider-Man Noir, I'm going to pick him.
Okay. I did not expect that to be off the board this early. That's fascinating. But given the popularity of that film, I think from a voting perspective here, I think that might be a good call.
Maybe. Yeah, maybe. We'll see.
Maybe a good
I'm
call.
testing the waters a little bit here.
Okay. So I'm going to go with two films here that might win over cinephiles, but depending on how broad the voting gets here, it might not do me all that great. But we'll see. We'll see. So I'm going back to the 90s here with my next pick.
Okay.
And it's not action Nicolas Cage. We're going back to performance prowess Nicolas Cage.
Okay, I think I know where you're going with this.
But I do think it's one that people are aware of and generally quite like. I'm going with Leaving Las Vegas from 1995. Okay. This is considered one of his best performances by many. I think Nick Cage himself has said that this is his favorite film that he's done.
I think he has said that. Yeah, you're right.
And I don't blame him. This is a really great film that gets into the horrors of addiction, particularly alcoholism. He portrays a man that's struggling with suicide as well.
Yeah.
And it's really fantastic how you have two characters who are struggling and extremely vulnerable colliding in this film in the ways that we see there. And it's really fantastic. It's certainly a swing of the pendulum from all of the fun Nick Cage that we've been talking about in these last few picks.
For sure.
But it truly is one of his best movies that he's been in, one of his best performances. And it demonstrates that for all of the fun that comes with Nick Cage, whether it be Face Off, The Rock, Spider-Verse, or even something like Mandy or even Raising Arizona, there's a lot of fun that can be had with Nick Cage. But when push comes to shove, he is an incredible actor. And I think this is certainly a pick that I think is defining of the range of him. And I also love how it is antithetical with a capital A to the next pick I'm going to have here.
Well, yeah, and one thing I do want to mention, forgive me, I don't know if you said this, but this is the film where Nick Cage won an Oscar.
Yes, as well. No, I didn't even get to that. Yes, he won an Oscar. There was awards for this as well.
Yeah, let's remember, Nick Cage is also an Oscar winner. I think some people forget that.
Yes, I think that's, because I don't, like, awards isn't usually where I go to first when I'm talking about art and film. But
yeah.
That certainly adds some credibility to it all as well. Great performance, deserving of the Oscar. And then there's something like Vampire's Kiss from 1988, which is, again, wholly antithetical to something like Leaving Las Vegas, where if you've seen manic, insane Nick Cage memeified in any way on social media, it is almost wholly from this movie. You've seen him from this movie, even if you haven't seen this movie. Okay. And it's for good reason, right? This is a romp of a movie, and Cage really goes for it, fully committed. You gotta love it. It's so much fun, and to me, it is quintessential crazy Nick Cage. So I have to go for it here.
What a wild movie. It is written by the same writer as Martin Scorsese's After Hours.
Yeah.
It's absolutely insane. I mean, yeah, like I never misfiled anything, not once, not one time. That's a line that'll go down in history for sure.
Yeah. Gotta love it.
I haven't seen this movie in a while, but I
kind
of like it.
I do too. I do too. I especially love Cage. So yeah. Little Vampire's Kiss, my next selection here.
All right. Well, I did sort of allude to what my next pick will be. Okay, so you have your 5 picks now. You're halfway done. So now it's snaking back to me. I've got 2 picks. This will be my number 5 and number 6. I alluded to the writer of Vampire's Kiss writing a Martin Scorsese movie. So I'm going to pick a Martin Scorsese movie for my number 5 pick, and that's Bringing Out the Dead, the character of Frank Pierce, which I think is, if you want to talk about a performance and a character that's very antithetical to what we refer to as Nicolas Cage these days, at least mostly, it's a very subdued performance of his. It's a very haunted performance. It's kind of the whole point of the movie. I actually think this is a very underrated Martin Scorsese movie. I love the script by Paul Schrader. It definitely has some of those similar like ghostly vibes that Taxi Driver had. So in some ways, it almost feels like an aesthetic companion piece to that film. But I do love the quality of Nick Cage's performance for a man that seems very internalized. It's almost like he's ready to explode into his usual Nick Cageisms and just doesn't do so. So in a way, it's almost like the character is a deconstruction of the Nicolas Cage we kind of know, right? Which I think has weirdly made that performance in that movie age even more favorably as time has gone on because of what we can compare it to. So yeah, I'll pick Frank Pierce here from Bringing Out the Dead. And as far as my next pick, this is where it gets a little bit tricky. Because kind of like you, I think I need to at least pick something that's in the same echelon of Vampire's Kiss. Something that's just so memeified, for better and for worse. I've got to go with The Wicker Man. I got to do it. I've got to go with Edward Mollis from The Wicker Man, which is a terrible movie, an absolutely dreadful movie.
Not the bees.
What is in the bag? A shark or something? But if you don't quote this movie on a regular basis as a movie fan, I don't. If you say that, I don't believe you, right? Like there are certain moments, terrible moments, that are sort of engraved in our circle right now.
Yeah.
So for those reasons, I feel like I need to at least acknowledge it. But what? Oh, not my eyes, not the bees.
You've heard it 1,000 times. It's so good. It's
Why would you do a ridiculous thing like that?
So good. Okay, so Wicker Man and Bringing Out the Dead. All right, so Leaving Las Vegas, Vampire's Kiss was my last 2. I think for my next 2 here, I think I'm going to try to find a middle ground between artistry and popularism. So I think for my next pick here, I'm going to go with one that is among his most popular. I think there's at least 2 here that are certainly open for that.
Sure.
I'm going to go with National Treasure.
I almost picked that one just recently. Yeah, but I didn't.
I'm going to go with National Treasure. Again, perfectly fine movies. I think they're fun, good popcorn entertainment. Nick Cage isn't doing anything all that spectacular in them, but it's maybe the 2 movies that he might be most known for, arguably.
Yeah, especially of a certain generation, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I know some kids from that time who were way younger than me back in the early 2000s who kind of see this as their Indiana Jones, right?
For sure. And I think they're perfectly adequate, fine movies. You know, we've talked about this before. Movies don't have to be the best thing you've ever seen or the worst thing you've ever seen. It's okay if they fall right in the middle. These are 2 movies that I think are perfectly adequate popcorn movies. And Nick Cage is there for a paycheck, but I think, again, he's fine. He's not trying to win an Oscar, and he's also not trying to be manic, crazy ass Nick Cage either. He does his job as he should.
Yeah.
But he is very well known for those movies. So as a character draft, if you will, characters that he's most known for, I think it should be
fair.
here.
I think that's fair.
So I'm going to take it. As for my next pick, man, there's a couple here that I'm really going back and forth on. I think I'm going to go with Moonstruck from 1986.
Oh, dang you. Dang it.
So sorry. Yeah, love him in this with Cher. I think their chemistry is magnetic. And it's fascinating because they're almost giving two very different performances.
They are.
Like
They really are.
Different movies. But I think that complements the messiness of the film and the drama that they find themselves in.
Yeah.
So I do love that. And I love Cage here, how you really do see him as an early actor here finding his rhythm as an actor and the range that he's able to show. And there's something about 80s Cage that I just really love. It's so different from what we get in the 90s and even into the 2000s. Cage had evolved into something else even from the 90s. But I like early, or not even just early, but like 80s Cage, I think is, maybe this is hyperbole, but like 80s Cage, I think is up there with some of the best we've seen. Like, I mean, all time kind of stuff.
Yeah,
like in terms of talent and like possibilities, like potential that he showed as an actor in the 80s.
Yeah.
Is great.
Yeah.
I mean, just some incredible range. So
no, you're not wrong. You're not wrong.
Obviously, he didn't maintain that for the better, I think.
I think for the better. Yeah, I am with you.
He evolved into a very different actor that just, it wouldn't be the same without him doing that. So I am grateful. But if he had maintained that level of nuance and trajectory into the 90s and 2000s, I mean, I do think we would be talking about one of the all-time greats.
I think so. Yeah.
But that's the kind of potential I feel like he showed. And you see that with something like Moonstruck. You're like, man, he's so good here. Like,
I agree. It's one of his better performances.
So good.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Like it's crazy. Like you watch that and you're like, how did this guy evolve into who he is now?
Yeah.
And look, he's still great now. Don't get me wrong. It's just so different.
I gotta say, in a weird way, I'm kind of grateful that he evolved the way that he did.
Yeah.
Because there is no one like Nick Cage.
No.
And he knows it. He is so aware of it. He has made fun of himself about that very thing on SNL before.
Yeah.
He basically came in and made a joke as a guest appearance on SNL saying like, my goal is to be in every single movie ever made.
Yeah. Yeah. And especially given his financial troubles, he just, the last, 15, 20 years or so, he's just had to take whatever he could get.
Absolutely.
And that makes his filmography all the more interesting, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, he's evolved as an actor mostly for the better, or at least it makes him singular and distinct.
Yeah.
But yeah, 80s Cage had capital P potential written all over him, and he's genuinely great in quite a few of them. Moonstruck is up there with some of his best work of that period for sure.
I do agree. All right. It's my turn now, I guess. Right? I've got two to go here. Yeah, this is getting tricky. I've got a lot that I can pick from here that I think are potentially great. The thing is, it's like I'm having this battle between my head and my heart right now, JD, because a lot of the ones I might want to pick are from movies I actually don't care for at all.
Okay.
But I know that not only do people like him, but the Nicolas Cage of them is still good. So, you know what? Okay. So I don't care for this movie that much. I think it's okay. But for my next pick, this is my number 7. So you just got through your number 7. This is my number 7, then eventually my number 8. My number 7, I'm going to go with Nicolas Cage from The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So real recent.
Real recent. But I think the dynamic between Cage and Pedro Pascal is what makes this movie. The problem with the movie is that when it tries to function as this like comedic espionage thriller outside of that, I think it kind of fails. But the dynamic between those two leads and Nicolas Cage being very self-aware of his own career, that's something I can't ignore, right?
Yeah,
This
sure.
is why I have so much respect for him, because Nicolas Cage has given terrible performances in terrible movies before, right?
Yeah.
We know that, and guess what? He also knows that. So and
Yep.
he's not ashamed of it. So the fact that he isn't ashamed of it and he sort of indirectly addresses that in this movie is one of the things I do appreciate about it. So
Yeah.
and I do love that he's credited here, or at least his character is Nick Cage as opposed to Nicolas Cage. So it's almost like it's assuming a new, I guess, variant of Nicolas Cage, if that makes sense, which I think is kind of funny. So yeah, The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent film, I think I'm mixed on, but I like the Cageisms of it. So I'll pick him
Okay.
next. As far as my number eight. I know it's going to be a popular one, so I'm just going to pick this one here, even though I think it's very similar to ones we've talked about already. I'm going to go with Cameron Poe from Con Air.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Because I feel like it needs to be here. I feel like
it should be picked.
we would get crap if we picked Face Off, The Rock, but not Con Air. Okay. So I'll pick him here. I think of the three action films that are sort of in weird comparison with each other because of the Nick Cage of it all, that being Con Air, The Rock, and Face Off, I think Con Air is the lesser of the three. And I even think Nick Cage's presence is perhaps the lesser of the three. But again, the long hair, the hair in the wind moment is just kind of memeable.
It's iconic now, yeah.
Yeah, just
Like
that
a
moment
funny moment
alone
now, yeah.
deserves to be on anyone's list when it comes to top 10
Yeah.
Nick Cage characters. So yeah, I'm going to pick it here.
Look, again, say what you will about the film, but he is synonymous with that movie, and it is probably one of the first images you think of. Or at least I could understand that being the case.
Absolutely.
So, yes. Okay. Con Air off the board. Man, this is where things get real tricky now here. So
I know.
All right. I'm going to talk through this as I'm looking through a few options here. I think to start off here for my first pick, while I figure out how I want to round out my next pick. All right. To start things off, I'm going to go with Wild at Heart.
Oh, dang it. There's another one I was hoping to snag.
So I am picking this based simply off the fact that it's Nick Cage and David Lynch. I have not seen this movie. It is a blind spot for me.
That's fair. That's fair.
So I can't speak to it. I am only hoping that others have and that they love it because it's David Lynch and it's Nick Cage together.
That's smart. That's smart.
And that people will see that and go, yes, I love that pick. Great job, JD. And I'll be like, thank you. Thank you.
And many of those might not even listen to the podcast, so they'll just think, "Oh, good job, JD." They'll see the list and think JD loves that movie and picked it. So you're I see how you're cheating here. I love it.
Exactly. So I'm just pandering to the voters with that one.
Yeah.
So going with Wild at Heart there. Okay, so now this is where it gets tricky. What do I want to go with for my next film here? So, Man Live. This is getting real hard.
I swear I'm looking at my list now of those that I still have on reserve, man. I've got a lot left. I really do.
But there's certainly so many films here, but I'm trying to think of what best exemplifies this conversation. Because I just feel like there's a lot of movies here that are I could leave or take. So let's see here. Okay. Should I go with Honeymoon in Vegas, as it's, of course, the prequel to Leaving Las Vegas? I say sarcastically.
Yeah,
could go with that.
Yeah, that's very sarcastic of you.
You know what? Okay, I got one. Gone in 60 Seconds.
I was
That's
thinking
my next one.
You're going with Memphis Reigns. All right. Yeah.
Yep, going with Memphis Reigns.
I swear, seeing all the ads for that on television back when that first came out, and would always be his like, what was he doing? Like, okay, let's ride.
Because that's the other big in every film he's got at least one meme, like one GIF that is very popular, and that's the one from that movie.
Yep.
Let's ride.
Yep. I remember that. Yeah, and for those watching on YouTube, we'll see what I'm doing. But for those listening in podcast form, I've got like the two fingers kind of like flicking back and forth between my ears.
That's just yes. Thank you, Nick Cage, for that. We needed that. Fine movie. I think it's fun.
Yeah, it's
nothing spectacular or anything like that, but a fun movie with a fun performance. Again, Nick Cage is memorable in it.
Yeah.
Whereas everything else might be forgettable, except for maybe Angelina Jolie, who's unrecognizable in that movie.
That's fair.
But you do remember parts of that movie because of him. So got to go with Memphis Reigns here. Gone in 60 seconds.
All right. So we're almost done. We actually did pretty well with this, JD, as far as time and our brevity is concerned.
Yeah.
So I've got 2 picks left, and that'll complete my top 10. And then we circle back to you for one last pick, right?
More. Yep.
Yeah. So, all right, give me a sec. We're at the point here where we're doing this in real time. I'm doing some research here, because I've got at least 7 or 8 I can equally argue should fill out my final 2 spots. But which ones will they be? Okay, you know what? I didn't think I was gonna pick this. Actually, what do I want to do that one? Oh, I don't know. I don't know what to do, man. I don't know what. Okay, you know what? I think I know where I'm gonna go with this. I'm gonna pick this first one here because I actually think there's an audience for this movie, and that's the character of Rick Santoro from Snake Eyes.
Okay, yeah, Snake Eyes.
Yeah, and again, it's one I haven't seen in a long time. If I were to rewatch that movie, I might as well call it a first-time watch, because it's one I did see back when it first came out. Admittedly, I didn't love it at that time, but from what I understand, and just looking at Letterboxd, it does seem to have an audience. So I'm sort of picking that one on a whim just to see if it hopefully helps me out.
Okay.
So yeah, we'll see if that does work for me. Actually, give me 1 sec. I think, there we go. Hang on. I'm trying to type this out real time. I want to make sure that I'm not accidentally deleting anything because we have to post this online and make sure that we have the accurate list. So I'll go with Rick Santoro from Snake Eyes as my number 9 pick. And to round this out, who am I going to pick to complete this top 10 Nick Cage draft?
None other than Johnny Blaze.
Oh, no, I'm not doing that one. Oh, shoot. Again, head versus heart mentality here. I've got one here that I actually really want to go with because I think it's an underrated performance of his, but I don't necessarily think it's going to help me out that much.
Okay.
But then there's another one here that I do think also, once again, has a bit of an audience.
Yeah, there's certainly a few like that for sure.
Yeah. You know what? I'm gonna go with the audience pick. It's a film I hate, but I kind of like Nick Cage in it. I'm gonna go with Kick-Ass.
Yep, that was the other one. Yeah.
Yeah. Big Daddy specifically.
Yep. I like it.
You like the film?
I like the film,
okay.
But I especially love Cage. He's the best part of it, hands down.
The scenes between him and Chloe Grace Moretz, I love. I pretty much detest everything else in that movie.
Fair enough. I mean, knowing your sensibilities, that makes sense.
Well, and even if I were to get over like the things I normally don't like in movies like that, I just and I love Aaron Taylor Johnson as an actor, but I don't like him that much in that movie. I just think he's bland. I don't think he's a good center for that movie. And maybe it's because of how great the dynamic of father and daughter is and how creepy
Cage
that it kind of is.
And Chloe Grace Moretz, they steal that movie.
They absolutely steal it. So that's what saves anything from that movie for me. But yeah, but I do think Cage is great in it. So yep,
Yeah.
I'll round out my top 10 that way.
Yep, that was definitely one that I was thinking about here as my last pick. So
Okay.
yeah, that's a good pick. I do like that, and I would venture out to say that there definitely is an audience. I think
There is.
I
There
think
is.
some people definitely like that movie for
Yeah.
sure. Okay, my last one here. This is not an audience pick. This is again pandering to cinephiles, I guess. But I guess circling it back to the heart of this, we're talking about the best Nicolas Cage characters.
I think I know who you're going to go with
And
this.
I do think this is deserving to be in the conversation, especially when we consider the context in which this came out, because there was a period where he started to simply take roles simply for the sake of it.
Yeah.
And so he had made a bunch of movies simply for hire because he needed the money. And in the middle of that, you do get something like a Kick-Ass, for example,
Yeah.
or even something like Bad Lieutenant, which
I almost
could
went
be
with that.
considered for this, for the crazy manic Nick Cage performance.
The scene with the iguanas.
It's great.
Yeah.
Very, very good. And while I could consider that here for this last pick, I think there are others that I think represent Cage better. And of course, this is a better movie as well.
Can I take a guess of what I think you're picking here? Because it doesn't matter what I say, because I'm out of options. I already picked my list. So
Yeah.
You're going with Joe, aren't you?
Going with Joe, absolutely, from
yeah.
2013. So, and this was, again, it comes out at a time where it's interesting, the three major players involved, honestly, in hindsight, because you get a really young Ty Sheridan who has a couple of really fantastic films around this time. And then you get Nicolas Cage, who gives, honestly, to that point in 2013, one of his best performances, especially in a long time. You could argue that was his best performance since Adaptation.
Yeah, that's what I was just going to say.
It had been about 10 years. And I still think it holds up as one of his best performances, even, another decade down the road. So it's a good movie. You get a young Ty Sheridan, and also it's David Gordon Green. I want David Gordon Green going back to making these kinds of movies, because this is when he was at his best, because he does Joe, and then the next year what he does is Prince Avalanche, which is another very good small film. Like, when he's doing these small, like, character pieces, I think he can be a good director. His studio comedies, no. His studio horror films, especially no.
No.
That was him at his best.
I don't think it's a coincidence, at least for me, that my two favorite David Gordon Green films are probably Joe and Prince Avalanche.
Yeah. I don't think it's not a coincidence.
And I've seen some of his earlier films. I mean, I do really like George Washington as well. I haven't seen Snow Angels, but admittedly, I like All the Pretty Girls. I don't love Undertow. So going to movies like Joe and Prince Avalanche, I think those are his two best films, honestly.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. So, again, I understand, depending on, again, how broad the voting base gets. A lot of people might not know of this film, know of its existence or Cage's performance.
Yeah.
But those that have seen it will know, yes, he is very good in that movie. It's one of his best performances, and I would urge anyone to go and seek it out.
Yeah.
Because it's a really unique film, given the context in which it came out for all three of those artists there. So definitely launched Ty Sheridan's help that alongside Mud. Was he in Mud with Nick or
with Matthew McConaughey?
Well?
Yeah, he was. Yeah.
Fascinating, that time period for him in that regard.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, so I'm gonna go with Joe as my last pick here. So
Almost went with that one as well. I guess, as we round out this conversation, JD, let's talk about some other Nick Cage characters and performances that we didn't pick for our lists that we almost thought about. The one I was almost going to go with for my number 10 before I settled on Kick-Ass was either Joe or Ty Sheridan. Or the underrated performance I was referencing there was the character of Roy Waller from Matchstick Men, which I actually think is a pretty darn good Ridley Scott film. And I do love Cage's performance in that one as well. So that's
agree. That's a good one. Yep.
Yeah, so that's one I almost went to. And if I were to try and go back to the 1980s era of Nick Cage, I thought about going with Peggy Sue Got Married.
Yep, that's the one that I thought about for this as well.
Yeah, but again, I feel like it's more of a centric performance from someone other than Nicolas Cage in that movie.
Sure.
So that's kind of what took it out of contention for me then.
Yeah. No, I think that's very fair. As far as some others, I mean, I sort of thought of Ghost Rider here simply because the movies aren't that great, but I do think there is a popularity factor there with Cage.
Yeah.
Another one I thought of was Wind Talkers, which isn't again, it's not a great war film.
I haven't seen it, admittedly.
I think he's quite good in it, though.
Okay.
Very good. Has a nice dynamic with the supporting cast around him. So yeah, I mean, and it also tells a story that is under talked about when it comes to World War II. So it's a nice Rustin-y kind of story in that regard, I guess.
Sure. Yeah.
And obviously there's a lot in the back half of his career that you could talk about if you really wanted to get into all of the on-demand stuff.
Actually, oh man, yeah, don't get me started on some of those. Admittedly, I haven't seen most of them. Looking at a few other ones here, I know a movie like Lord of War was well received when it first came out. So I almost thought about that one alongside The Weatherman. Both came out in 2005. So those, and even I think 1 year after that was World Trade Center, which feels like if there's anything about that movie, it's more so the historical circumstances of it all and the Oliver Stone of it all, and Nicolas Cage just happens to be in it.
Yeah,
and that just doesn't seem to fit the bill here. I will say, as far as some of his other films in the late 2000s, was a film called Knowing that I actually think is kind of underrated. I don't think it's a great sci-fi movie, but I actually think there are some really interesting ideas in it. I think it's pretty underappreciated at the very least.
That's not one that I love all that much, but I'd have to go back and revisit. I haven't seen that film in so long, but I don't remember liking that film all that much. But
it's not a great movie, but it at least has some bold ideas in it.
Yeah. Anything else that comes to mind? Should we recap?
Well, I will say it's unfortunate that he just got done playing Dracula, and it would have been nowhere near my list. The idea of Nick Cage playing Dracula should be the greatest thing on planet Earth.
It sounds awesome.
Yeah. You've seen Renfield, right?
Yes, of course.
Yeah. I think you liked it more than I did. I actually think that's one of the worst movies of the year so far. But it's a wasted opportunity for something that could have been so interesting.
Yeah. I certainly didn't loathe it, but I don't think it's great. I did find it disappointing for sure.
Gotcha. Okay.
In time, Dream Scenario probably would have made this list for me.
Oh, okay.
Especially if we're just talking characters and we're removing the voting portion of it. Yeah, I think in time, Dream Scenario would. I didn't pick it because a lot of people haven't seen it yet.
That's fair. That's fair. Yeah.
There really, no reason to get to that quite yet, but and we'll talk about it later this week. But as a character and performance, certainly worthy of being in the conversation for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So as we wind down here, I do want to recap our list. So here are my 10. I have Adaptation, Mandy, The Rock, Leaving Las Vegas, Vampire's Kiss, National Treasure, Moonstruck, Wild at Heart, Gone in 60 Seconds, and Joe.
It's a very good list. My list includes Raising Arizona, Pig, Face Off, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, Bringing Out the Dead, The Wicker Man, The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent, Con Air, Snake Eyes, and Kick-Ass.
All right, so there it is. Let us know whose list you like better, which one you prefer.
Yeah.
We'll put a tweet out on social media later on in the week. But of course, you can hit us up on social media beforehand.
Yep.
Leave a comment below if you're watching on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe to the channel, like the video, all that fun jazz. It really helps out the show.
Absolutely.
And I think that's it, Brennan. Anything else? I think we can go ahead and wind down.
I think we can get back in our cages and go to bed.
Get back in our cages. All right. So, all right. Well, with that out of the way, again, be sure to hit us up on social media, like us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all that fun stuff. Be sure to look out this week for some reviews. We have May December coming.
Yep.
We have Dream Scenario, of course. And Hayao Miyazaki's The Boy and the Heron is on the docket for this week.
Gosh, we are busy with some heavy hitters now, aren't we?
Yeah, very, very, very busy. And in case you missed it, if you didn't see any of our reviews from last week, we have Saltburn.
Yeah.
We have Poor Things.
Yeah.
And this little Ridley Scott movie called Napoleon. We got reviews for all three of those out right now.
Ridley Scott does not make little movies, you dummy.
No, he does not. He does not. But yeah, we have those reviews are out. It was really fun. Definitely urge people to go and check those out. Stay tuned for this week's crop of shows and reviews. Women in Session will have a new show out soon as well. So you can be on the lookout for that. Again, if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, please leave us a review if you can.
Yes, please.
And rate us. It really helps out the show. We would really greatly appreciate it if you can do that. And similarly on YouTube, subscribe to the channel or at least like this video. It really helps us out a lot.
Yep.
Thank you to all of our patrons.
Yes.
Again, we cannot do this without you. So thank you to you for supporting us. And I believe that's it. Am I missing anything?
I think that's it. We had a good conversation on our latest Patreon opening here, JD. We opened that talking about one thing, and it ended up being 45 minutes of something else. Then
I know, I know. It was really fun how that just kind of organically turned out. So.
Not just how we operate. Same brain, man. Same brain.
I know. Real fun. So yeah, we have some exclusive Patreon content out this week that you can go and check out. Again, that's patreon.com/InSessionFilm.
Yep.
Busy season. Award season.
Busy season, man. And
crazy.
I am not going to play my cards too much yet for those who might be listening to this now. And let's say our reviews of May, December, and The Boy and the Heron are already out. But I watched those movies back to back. And it made me realize 2023 is kind of a banger of a movie year.
Yeah. I didn't do any sort of exercise as far as ranking a top 10 or anything until like a week ago. I did like a preliminary list.
Yeah.
So it took me a while. I didn't really put one together until November. And I got to like 30 films. I'm like, my God, this is more than I realized a really strong year.
Yeah.
And then you add in these movies that we're now seeing in recent weeks. And you're like, I think Brendan is onto something. This could end up being one of the best years in some time.
Yeah, it's
possible.
It's making. I mean, if I were to stop right now, I am very happy with my top 10.
Yeah, I agree. And there's still more to see. I'm very excited to see how all of this plays out.
Probably have like 100 more movies I still need to see.
I know, like there's still so much to see. But yeah, it's an exciting time of year. That's for sure. So
yeah.
Alrighty. Well, with all of that said, we hope everyone enjoyed the show this week. Thanks for listening, everybody. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time on the InSession Film Podcast. Not the bees.
I never misfiled anything. Not once, not one time.